Coming up, Jewish leaders in Kentucky react to Hamas's attack on Israel. And election administrators in one southern Kentucky county are preparing for next month's election.
Plus, after chilly and soggy weather on Monday, we are tracking some improvements by tomorrow. Your full forecast on the way as Mountain News First at 4 continues.
Mountain News First at 4 continues.
Jewish leaders across Kentucky are reacting to Hamas's attacks on Israel. Some of those leaders are at a synagogue in Lexington. Julia Sandor has more.
It's a conflict that spans for decades.
I grew up to the story of my grandparents' home being demolished in 1948. They were forced to take refuge in St. George's Convent in Jerusalem, in which they raised 6 children in a one-bedroom apartment.
Through the stories of family and friends, those on both sides of the conflict feel the heartache of this war.
Hearing about this kind of violence that is really, at least in my lifetime, unprecedented, was traumatic. It was extremely difficult, and it's something that we were not prepared for.
For one Lexington rabbi, the news of the Hamas attacks on Israel came during service.
And it was really difficult news to hear, but I will say that being in community and actually being toward the tail end, but still in the midst of our holiday season, a time that's joyous and celebratory, helped a lot, that we got to experience and encounter that information for the first time together.
People here in Lexington are continuing to check in on friends and family overseas as the war rages on.
This is the dynamic between a people who are struggling for their freedom and a state that is struggling to suppress it.
While each side has their own opinion and viewpoint, they are both grieving and hoping for a solution. In Lexington, Julia Sandor, WKYT.
The Republican candidates for president are talking about the war in Israel on campaign stops. Former President Donald Trump spoke at a campaign event today in Wolfboro, New Hampshire.
When I was your president, we had peace through strength, and now we have weakness, conflict, and chaos. The atrocities we're witnessing in Israel would never have happened if I was president, would never have ever happened.
On the campaign trail today, Trump called President Joe Biden an incompetent and corrupt leader. Former South Carolina governor and U.S. ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley campaigned in Iowa today. Haley's stops included town halls at the Pharmacy Soda Fountain and a coffee house in Ida Grove, Iowa, and then on to Boone, Iowa. Before her first event, she released her latest fundraising numbers and says she raised more than $11 million.
Look at the world right now. We've talked about domestic policy. Let's talk about national security. Every one of us should have a heavy heart for what's happening in Israel right now.
A news release from Haley's campaign indicates her team has welcomed nearly 40,000 new donors in the past 3 months. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made a stop in Cherokee, Iowa at a lab. DeSantis spoke to reporters briefly after getting off the bus and before touring the lab about Israel and President Joe Biden's actions.
Now is the time for leadership. Joe Biden, they called the lid at 11:51. He's been missing in action yesterday, knowing that Americans had been killed by Hamas in Israel, and with many unaccounted for, and maybe some of them have been taken hostage.
Earlier today, DeSantis spoke to a morning crowd of about 100 about Israel, condemning the attacks.
Well, it was definitely a Monday across the mountains. We had gloomy, chilly, and soggy weather, but we are tracking some better weather as early as this evening, also into your Tuesday. But right now, still watching out for a few light to moderate showers in southwest Virginia, also close to the Kentucky and Virginia border. Places in Harlan County, also in Letcher County, a few spotty sprinkles and some heavier showers now in Buchanan County, Virginia. But as we go further north and west, we are tracking some clearing skies as some drier air begins to work into the region, and that temperature up to 61 over at the London Corbin Airport. Notice for our Areas north and west of Hazard and Pikeville, we are warmer, up to 66 in Somerset, also Moorhead, but down to 49 for Grundy, also Clintwood. So you can see where the clouds and the showers are hanging tough at this hour over southeast Kentucky, also southwest Virginia. But as we go further off into this week, we are tracking some warmer, also drier weather before our next rain chance by late Friday. Also into this weekend as a busy forecast is on the way, not only tracking some rain chances, but also a partial solar eclipse on Saturday. And Mother Nature may not cooperate as clouds look to hang tough on Saturday. All those details coming up in just a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Cameron, thank you. Kentucky County clerks are preparing for Election Day. Tomorrow is the last day you can register to vote in that election. Kentuckians will be voting for a governor and constitutional officers, and some counties may have various local races as well. Election Day is coming up November 7th. WYMT's Phil Pendleton spoke to several county clerks about the process.
State races dominate the ballot for Kentucky this election year, with a lot of eyes on the governor's race. There are also constitutional offices that'll make up people's ballots.
There are many different fail-safes.
Laurel County is preparing for a possible voter turnout between 34 and 40% of registered voters, but County Clerk Tony Brown says it's anyone's guess what the turnout will actually be. Time is running out if you have not registered to vote.
Right now, you can still register to vote until tomorrow at 4 o'clock. It ends tomorrow at 4 p.m.
Both Laurel and Boyle counties will have voting centers on Election Day. That's multiple locations instead of precincts where you can vote. Early voting will also take place on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before Election Day. In Boyle County, early voting will now take place at the showroom off U.S. Highway 127.
Trying to make it our biggest location, wanting to try to bring as many people as we can into the locations. There's plenty of parking, big space. I think it'll make early voting in Boyle County a lot easier.
Boyle County voters also have a local school board race. And other than the governor's race and the races for various constitutional offices, the only other race on local ballots here will be for a school board race. In Laurel County, Phil Pendleton, now back to you.
Phil, thank you. Early voting locations vary across the state. In Laurel County, the location this year will again be the courthouse annex. One Somerset organization is aiming to help homeless people in the area. Help the Homeless started as an initiative to supply folks in need with items such as food and clothes. Founder and President Jessica Luster says they see up to 60 people a day, and they receive calls more than 100 times a week. She says in just 10 months, they have opened up an office and now a shelter,
which works as a transitional housing center for our unhoused neighbors in need. And they're able to work and use our showers here during the day and sleep there at night and kind of progress on with their dreams. We've already housed a couple people.
Luster says it's a step in the right direction. However, they are now gearing up for the winter months. We'll have more about that tonight at 6. Pike County schools are on fall break, but Millard School is using the break to give back. The school hosted a blood drive today in partnership with the Kentucky Blood Center and the families of 2 students who have cancer battles and stories of their own, Declan McCoy and Cooper Coleman. Teachers and staff members from area schools started things off this afternoon, and dozens of people poured in after to help support the cause.
Declan's family is one that was inspired and actually reached out to the Blood Center to do this blood drive because they are about giving back. And until you experience that in your family, I don't think you realize how important it is to do things like this. Giving blood is a simple thing we can do compared to the pain and the agony and the turmoil that these families are going through.
The drive wraps up at 5 o'clock and has seen more than 20 donors roll up their sleeves for the students. Coming up on First at 4, the president of the United Auto Workers joins picketers for a weekend strike.
Plus, we are tracking drier weather for the middle of the week before more rain chances by late Friday. All those details coming up.